In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the merciful. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to our course Phonetics. Our today's topic is branches of phonetics. Today we will discuss different branches of phonetics, and mainly our today's concern will be articulatory and auditory phonetics. So let's see what are the branches of phonetics. Here you can see there are three branches of phonetics, and number one is here articulatory phonetics, number two is auditory phonetics, and then number three acoustic phonetics. So what is articulatory phonetics? In this type of or in this branch of phonetics, the main concern is with the actions and movements of the speech organs, how these organs produce different sounds, or what sort of organs are involved in producing different speech sounds, different producing human speech sounds. And number two is auditory phonetics. It deals how speech is received by the ears. It means it's related to what we can say, it's related to perception of the speech sounds. In what way a listener understand, or in what way a listener perceive the speech sounds. Number three, acoustic phonetics. It deals with the nature and acoustics of the sound waves which transmit speech. And we will discuss this acoustic phonetics in greater detail, but not in our today's lecture. Our today's lecture, our main focus will be on articulatory and auditory phonetics. Apart from these three branches, as we have discussed in our previous slides, articulatory or auditory and acoustic phonetics. There are some other branches, as you can see here, perceptual phonetics. It deals with the how speech is perceived by listeners. It means we can say it's some sort of related to auditory, or maybe it's advanced level of auditory phonetics, or in this type of phonetics. Uh, what the main concern is how speech sound is perceived by the listener. It's related to the listener or hearer, in what way he understands and how he or she is able to understand the human speech sounds. It's related to perceptual phonetics. Next, there is a physiological phonetics. It deals with the anatomical, neurological, and physiological basis of speech. Actually, physiological phonetics is purely natural science rather than social science, and it's considered a branch of purely natural science, and it's a separate discipline in biological studies. When it focuses on speech system of human body, then there are three more disciplines in under the physiological system or physiological phonetics. So what are those system or discipline? Anatomy and physiology and neurology, sorry. So what we can understand by this term anatomy, it refers to study of structure of organism, right? Organism of speech organism. It means we are talking about what is the structure of human organism or speech organism or speech articulators. Physiology studies the function of living organism, its chemical process which is involved in the functions. So then there is the neurophysiology and speech, and under this physiological phonetics we are discussing this point. Any speaker produces speech using exhaling the air from his or her alveoli. Means our process of breathing out or breathing out process is involved when we speech, when we utter speech sounds. So speech is produced by the exhaling, means bringing the air out of the mouth, but with controlled airstream through lungs, velum, larynx, pharynx, lips, teeth, and nasal cavities, with construction of muscles caused by nervous system. So speech, we cannot see it. There's just there's speech articulators are involved, and they are moving, and they are uttering some speech sounds. Here the connection between these articulators with the brain we can see in this neurophysiology and speech. So, neurophysiology discusses the function of the brain and how brain controls body by fabrical nerves, and also called neurons, which are active every time work as communication source between brain and organs. So here, what we can understand in articulatory phonetics, we deal with these speech articulators, but in neurophysiology or neurology, when we talk about neurology, it means some sort of brain is involved, the function of the brain, the controllability of the brain to the body, control to the body, and by using those fabrical nerves. So it is mainly, you can understand, related to the brain system, or how functions of the brain is related to the articulators. So after the brief description or the brief introduction of the physiological phonetics and perceptual phonetics, we move on toward the our today's main concern, that is articulatory phonetics and auditory phonetics. So in articulatory phonetics, when we talk about its history, we found out that it was the very first language that was used. It was a Sanskrit, and the history of articulatory phonetics was used for the first time in the description of the pronunciation of the Sanskrit language, and it was done by the Indian scholars several centuries before Christ. So, for the first time, although we are dealing with this course of phonetics and we talk about the articulatory phonetics, we just think about the English names of the articulators or English phonetics. Or, however, the start or the initial language that was used for this articulatory phonetics or description of the pronunciation, it was the Sanskrit. So the first theory on the function of the vocal folds was proposed by Antoine Farron in the 18th century, Christian Gottlieb Kretzenstein, and Wolfgang von Kempelen attempted to explain the production of vowels and consonant sounds by making a talking machine. So what was the function of the talking machine? It was explain the how vowel sounds and how consonant sounds are produced in the vocal folds in the human. So here you can see the image of talking machine. You can also search on Google and you can see different samples and different images of this talking machine. So here you can see how it works. Maybe it's very simple, and it can be used for explanation of the vowels and consonant sounds. So, articulatory phonetics, it deals with the speech organs, and it is the focus of articulatory phonetics on speech organs and used to produce the sounds of human language. So, what are those organs or speech organs, and in what way those speech organs function and to utter speech sounds? Articulatory phonetics examine the sounds of human language as a source of their production and particular parts of the human body, as we can see here that the mouth cavity we observe and we examine in the focus of our investigation or focus of our study on the mouth cavity, referred to as organs of speech. So this particular parts of human body that is related to this articulatory phonetics, and it's for mainly these are called organs of speech and are used to articulate words. So what are those different organs, and in what way those organs are used in to utter or say some speech sounds? So the organs of speech, mainly there are organs of speech: voice box, lungs, trachea, windpipe. It's also called trachea is also called windpipe. Oral cavity, the nasal cavity, tongue, teeth, glottis, lips, and inner surface of the mouth. So throat may be divided into two parts, and one is upper part and the second is lower part. The upper part is called pharynx and the lower part is called larynx. I'm sorry. The larynx contains the vocal cords. So what is vocal folds we will discuss in our later slides. Here you just understand this point. The airflow needed to produce sounds come from the lungs and is passed through the mouth or nose. It means the air which comes from our lungs. When it passes through the mouth, there are two passages. If it comes from the mouth, uh, it's called oral passage, and when it comes through the nose, it's called nasal passage. So with other speech organs, by involving other speech organs like glottis, tongue, teeth, these speech organs are involved, and these act to make manipulation or to manipulate the airflow. Sometimes it goes up, the airflow goes up, sometimes it goes down, sometimes in the right direction, the left directions. It's moving toward the mouth. The air is moving toward the mouth by involving different speech organs. So why these organs are involved? These organs are involved with the airflow or make the airflow, manipulate the airflow to create different sounds. So the main function of the airflow. So what is the main function of airflow? It goes up and down, and by involving other speech organs, the sound, speech sound is uttered or speech sound is created. So the mechanism of airflow or airstream mechanism, if you remember our previous lecture, I have discussed all these things with greater detail. You can consult our previous lecture. So, when we talk about the articulatory phonetics, the main six factors we must keep in our mind. So, what are those six factors? Number one, the air strain or AST mechanism, as we have already discussed in our previous lecture. Consult your previous lecture. The place of articulation and the manner of articulation. Last week I have sent to you two lectures. It's related to place of articulation and the manner of articulation. So, among these six main factors, we will discuss only three factors in articulatory phonetics, and the first three, as we have already discussed, so no need to discuss it again. So, if you have some sort of confusion, some sort of problems, consult all these previous three lectures. Then there is a vocal folds or vocal cords, the velum and soft palate, and the position of the tongue. It means these three main factors we will discuss our in articulatory phonetics. So let's begin with vocal folds. In the books of phonetics, you will most oftenly you will see the two terms are being used, vocal folds and vocal cords. However, vocal cords, what we can see, it's an older terminology, and the new and latest term that is used for this concept is vocal folds. So we will use vocal folds. The vocal folds, what are vocal folds? Actually, basically consist of a muscle covered by several layers of fibrous tissues. Here you can see these are the triangular folds of pink tissues, and these tissues, pink tissues, have white edges. So these are called vocal cords. In this way, here you can see in the left side picture, you can see these vocal folds are open, and then the right side picture, vocal folds are closed. So this is triangular, what we can see a triangular shape of folds, and these are the pink tissues, and these have white edges. This is called vocal folds. So these triangular vocal folds, they are attached to the thyroid cartilage and at the back of the arytenoid cartilage. So the two arytenoid cartilages themselves sit on the cricoid cartilage and are attached to it with a joint. So this joint allows the arytenoid cartilages to move forward and backward and from side to side, which turns out to be important for speech, as it allows the speaker to adjust the position and tension of the vocal folds. Here you can see thyroid cartilage. Let's see, this is thyroid cartilage, and then there is a arytenoid cartilage. This is, you can see here, and the lower and bottom part, it's called cricoid cartilage. It's a cricoid cartilage. And then thyroid and arytenoid are joined or attached together with the cricoid cartilage with a joint. So this is the main function of the vocal folds when these are in the movement position, or it's open and closed position. So the primary function of the vocal fold is that of preventing food and drink from falling into the trachea and the lungs, and saving the organism from choking or suffocation. So the main function or primary function is that when we are eating or drinking, or so it prevents the things into liquid or solid that we are drinking or eating. It prevents those things to fall into the trachea or windpipe in the lungs, and thus saving the organism from suffocation. The secondary function, that was the primary, and the secondary function of the vocal folds, in that one important for the production of speech is that of the phonetation. Phonetation refers to the vocal fold rapidly opening and closing, as we have seen in our previous picture or previous slides. You can see over there that closing and opening of the vocal folds.
it's called. It means we are talking about the phonetation when we speak, or when we say something or state or utter something. So this opening and closing of the vocal folds is involved in this process is called the phonetation process, which is a process both controlled by the laryngeal muscles and powered by the air stream from the lungs. So the air stream from the lungs then pushes the vocal folds apart. So we can see the air comes through the lungs, then reach in the vocal folds or at the point of the vocal folds and make the vocal folds separate, thus letting some air through. And after that, immediately after that, the vocal folds are pulled together again, both because of the elastic properties of their stretched tissues and because of the suction or pressure generated by the flow of air through the glottal constrictions. So you can see that example when we have elastic band and we stretch with our both hands, and it becomes longer and longer, and again when we leave that stretch or we leave our force, it becomes again sequenced or it becomes again shortened, and what we can say again in the same position. So when air comes through the lungs, it makes the vocal folds apart, but after that, because of the elasticity or elastic properties of the vocal folds, they again join together, right? And this pressure, called the Bernoulli force, is similar to the suction or pressure that occurs when two trains pass each other at very high speed, and the sound and the pressure, it's similar to that pressure and sound. So the process of vibration can be likened to the movement your pulsed lips make when you blow through them and make them flap. You can see, you can do this experiment by yourself. Squeeze your lips together or joint your lips together and blow through them, and after that, when you will see your lips will be flat in this way. So the sound created in the larynx is just a quiet buzz sound, but after it has passes through the articulatory system, and this articulatory system makes this buzz sound into a sound that we perceive as a voice. And it could be a voice of male, it could be a voice of female, or it could be a voice of a child or adult person or a younger person. So this is the process that is involved in the vocal folds related to the voice system. So this buzz sound in the larynx is actually not created by the vibration of the vocal folds itself, but by the sequence of puffs of air. So the sequence of the puff of air is one time puff of air, two times puff of air, or three times. So how much sequence will be involved there? That will, what we can say, will create the impression of the sounds, or it's a vibration in the vocal folds. So this is what we can say, this is not the buzz sound created by the vibration of the vocal itself, but the sequence of puffs of air. So you can understand the main function of the airstream mechanism if you can recall our previous lecture in this way. So in articulatory system, we can understand there are two types of sounds, voice sounds and voiceless sounds, right? So only voice speech sounds are produced with vocal folds vibration. So when there is a vibration in the vocal folds, it means we are talking about voiced sounds. Or when there is no vibration, it means the sound is voiceless. Do the experiments by yourself. Say the sounds p and b. P, no vibration, and you can put your finger on your throat or Adam's apple by uttering this sound p, no vibration. Then say b, b, b. When you will Put your finger on your throat, you will feel vibration with your fingers. B, b. So there is vibration. If there is vibration uttering the sound, it means this is the voice sound. So p is voiceless sounds and b is voice sounds. Here you can see the in this picture you can see the vocal folds in the normal position. Here it's a normal position, or it's a closed, you can see, or closed position and open position. When you utter a sound, when there is a vibration, it means it will be a closed position. We say the sound the. So in the movements in this process, in this way, we can feel that the vocal folds are closed, but that there is a vibration because of this closeness of the folds. There is a vibration, the voice will be sounds. And in the next picture, you can see here when we take breath, so vocal folds are open, apart, or separated, so there is no vibration, or some sounds also are uttered when there is no vibration, like pa, pa. In this sense, I'm sorry. So when vocal folds are open, then there is no vibration.
So, number two that we are discussing under the heading of articulatory phonetics. So, number two is vellum. Firstly, we have discussed about the vocal folds, and now we are discussing the vellum. In the last part of the articulatory phonetics will be the tongue position. So the vellum or soft palate, these are the same things we can understand. Here you can see in this picture where is vellum. This part, a light pink part in the mouth tract, it's called vellum. It's also called soft palate. Or here you can see the hard palate. The light blue color, it's called hard palate. It's a back part of our upper teeth, or alveolar ridge it's also called. So this is a hard palate, but we are talking about the soft palate, soft palate or vellum. Oh, so why we say it's a palate? Can you understand this word palate? In Urdu language we use this word also, a plate, of our, what we can say, we use for eating a plate. So this um, but we can say it's like a plate. Yes, you can see this a straight or stretched part, and it's also called the roof of the mouth or upper part of the mouth. It's like a palate, so it's a palate. In English the word we use the palate, so it's a soft palate. The vellum consists of a muscular tissue and can be raised and lowered by a set of muscles. So this palate we can understand, sometimes it is lower down and sometimes it's going upwards. So do two positions we can feel or we can observe in this part of articulatory phonetics. So let's begin with airstream again. Airstream coming from the larynx can only enter in the nasal cavity when the vellum is lowered. So when the vellum is lowered, we produce the nasal sounds. Nasal sounds, the sounds that's coming from the nasal cavity or nasal passage. Or we are involved in quiet breathing. The volume is also lowered all the time so that air can enter through the nose and flow down to the lungs and flow out through the nose again. So this process of coming, entering and coming out from the lungs to the nose and from nose to the lungs, this process would be continued. So velum is lower down in this position. So when vellum is raised up, when we talk about something, when we say something, when we are involved in speech, so during speech, the vellum is usually raised. The air stream flows through the oral cavity only. So in this way, a nasal cavity will not be involved when the velum is raised up. Rather, oral cavity will be involved. The oral sounds, we will utter the oral sounds rather than nasal sounds. So accordingly, sounds produced with the raised velum are called oral sounds. So those speech sounds that are produced with a lowered velum and where the air stream flows only through the nasal cavity are called nasal sounds. Next, number three, the position of the tongue. This is our last topic under the heading or under the concept of articulatory phonetics. The position of the tongue in our mouth tract, the main part that is involved while we are speaking, while we are saying something, while we are uttering sounds. The main part is tongue, and it's a blessing of Allah Almighty that we are bestowed this great gift of Allah Almighty. We can move this organ in our mouth, we can say what do we want to, we can share our ideas with our friends, family, we can say what we want to do, what we want to say. So this is Allah Almighty's great blessings. So the tongue is the most important active articulator in the most complex organ of speech. It consists nearly entirely of muscles, is very versatile and can assume a wide variety of shapes. So due to its mobility, although we know that this is our tongue, we know this organs or fleshy part of our mouth, but there are some parts or there are some what we can say, we can classify these organs into different position, into different shapes. So due to its mobility or movements and flexibility, it makes the greatest contribution to changes the shape of the oral cavity. So here you can see this is our tongue, right, in our mouth. So this is the tip of the tongue, the frontal part of the tongue. It is also called the frontal part of the tongue, and upper that part, upper the tip of the tongue, there is a blade or a rough surface of the mouth. Sorry, a rough surface of the tongue. It's called blade. Then there is a frontal part, right? Then there is a back, or then there is a root. Again, here you can see there are three parts. This is the blade, this is the tip of the tongue, and this is the frontal part of the tongue, that is most visible part. It's called frontal part of the tongue. So tongue is usually divided into several function sections. So through these parts cannot move independently, of course, the root, the back, the front, the blade and the tip. So the front of the tongue, which is actually fairly in the middle of it, which lies below the hard palate when the tongue is at rest. See this, feel this position of the tongue, the what we get the front of the tongue below the hard palate when the tongue is at rest, and it can also arch upward in archway, in the round shape in archway, and it's very active in the production of the vowels. The blade of the tongue can move upward and come near to the hard palate, which forms the roof of the mouth. Tongue are lowered and the air stream passes at both sides of the tongue. It sounds like L sound, like we say, it's becomes a round, and the sides of the tongue are empty, and then from where air can passes through. So after discussing the articulatory phonetics, the next branch or next number two is auditory phonetics. What auditory phonetics is? Auditory, it's related to the hearing system, or it's related to the hearing of the sounds. In what way a person hears the sounds and understand the sounds and perceive the sounds. Articulatory phonetics is related to the speech organs or articulation of the sounds, how sounds are articulated, what sort of articulators involved, speech organs are involved in speech productions, and it's related to the speaker. But we can say in what way a speaker says something or use speech articulators, or say something, or to utter some sounds. Whereas in auditory phonetics, it's related to the hearer or listener. So, in what way a listener understands, in what way the organs of our ear or ear system involve, or in what way it functions. So, we will discuss in auditory phonetics. Auditory phonetics is the study of the way people perceive speech sounds. In other words, it investigates the hearing process. So, auditory phonetics is the branch of phonetics concerned with the hearing of speech sounds and with speech perception. So, it's related to the listeners, or in what way a listener understands the speaker's speech or speaker's sounds, right? So, physiology of the auditory phonetics seems very simple, while dividing the ear in three parts. What are those three parts? It's the outer, middle, and inner part, with description of their brief functions, but the details of the functions of every organ of auditory systems has not discovered, like the organs of articulatory systems. It means that there is a need for more investigation and more data is required related to this auditory phonetics. Whereas in articulatory phonetics, a lot of work, a lot of research, and many researches have been done on this concept of articulatory phonetics, but in auditory phonetics, still we need to do more investigation. So any sound coming from any source, be it a door slamming or someone speaking to you, is spreading from that source as a sound wave. So it's not a sound a person utters, or sorry, a person listens the sound. It's not a sound, it's a sound wave. So in this auditory phonetics, we will try to understand what the system of this sound waves. So a voice or a sound coming from any source, it is as a sound wave, causing the molecules on its way to crowd together and move apart again, or in other words, to vibrate. So the movements of the molecules or vibration of the molecules, it creates the sounds. So the vibrations of the molecules when reach our ear, they cause the eardrum in our middle ear to vibrate, right? So middle ear, when there is a vibration in the middle ear, too, this vibration is then carried on from the eardrum to the three little bones. So where it is started, it's started from the external ear, outer ear, then it reaches to the middle ear, and then there it goes to the inner ear. So the three little bones in the eardrum are called malleus, incus, and stapes. From these stapes, the vibration is carried into the inner ear and into the cochlea, a little coil-like organ filled with liquid. So cochlea is a portion of the inner ear that looks like a snail. It's a snail-like, or it's snail shell, or it's a snail-like organs, because the shape of the cochlea is really, it's like a snail. So in Greek word, cochlea is in Greek word, snail is called cochlea. So the cochlea receives sound in the form of the vibration, which cause the stereocella to move. The stereocella then convert these vibrations into nerve impulses, which are taken up to the brain to be. So here is a picture of ear or ear system or auditory system. Let's try to understand this mechanism of auditory systems. Here you can see there are three parts of the ear systems or auditory systems. This is a visible part, or external ear or outer ear it's called. It's a visible part, as we can see, touch, or observe this part. So this is a external ear or outer ear, and after that there is a middle ear. Here you can see the middle ear. There are three little bones, like malleus, incus, incus, or stapes. These are the three little bones.
And apart from this, there is the eardrum. It's like a speaker, or sometimes what we can say like a drum or eardrum. And after that, there is the inner part, the third part of the ear. It's called inner part, and there are two parts: cochlear or semicircular canals. Cochlear is a snail-like part of the internal ear. It's called cochlear. So when the vibration reaches from the external ear, it passes to these middle ears, or different parts or different bones of these middle ears, and after that it reaches in the cochlear. And from cochlear, these vibrations or movements of the vibration, it goes towards the different nerves. It's vestibular nerves or facial nerves or auditory nerves. And this the auditory nerves, then these nerves uh, are sent to the brain. Sorry, the vibration is sent to the brain by these auditory nerves, and the voice is heard by the listeners. Depending on the frequency of the sound coming in different part with different receptor cells of the basilar membrane is stimulated. So the low frequency or uh, what we can say weak sounds will make the membrane vibrate at less tip or upper and while high frequency or acute sounds or harsh or what we can say loud sounds will cause the lower and stiffer end of the membrane to vibrate. So the cells on the basilar membrane convert these vibrations to neural signals that are transmitted via the auditory nerves to the central receptors in controller of the entire process, the brain, and where we identify the incoming sound and the actual sound with the specific pitch.